we have a surge of illegal immigrant traffic coming in, mostly from Central America. And what local Border Patrol officials have been tackling now for months, it's got at least half a year, maybe going back a full year, is a steady increase of illegal immigrants from Central America, family units, women and their kids, hoping to get a permiso, getting a permit to stay in the U.S., getting a court date to appear later, and they may or may not appear. The majority don't. Let's talk about a 2008 law as well that might be at the root of this problem. Joining us on 710 KURV, he represents an Immigration Lawyers Association. He's president of that association. Doug Stump. Doug is an immigration attorney. Doug, welcome back to the show. Can you please define for us that 2008 law, and what does it say of immigrants, children who are illegal immigrants and make it to this country?
Sure, and thanks for having me again.
You bet.
Basically, what you're referring to is commonly referred to as the TVPRA. It's the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. It's a piece of legislation that President Bush pushed forward to provide protection to unaccompanied minor children. But in reality, what it does, it takes into account a settlement that was reached between the group of aliens in a class action lawsuit against, Janet Reno back in like 1996 and 97. And so the Supreme Court, across the country, there was a series of class actions, there was a settlement, and the 2008 law puts into play the laws, the settlement that came about as a result of that class action.
What was the original lawsuit? What was that case all about?
Well, there was a series of lawsuits just alleging that when unaccompanied minors were being detained, they were not being provided with proper due process, they were not being taken care of properly, they were being placed at risk. And after, it was called, the Immigration Naturalization Service didn't fall under the DHS entity until after the terrorist attack. So back in 97, it was the Immigration Naturalization Service that they began doing so their own investigation and reached a similar conclusion that the standards should be raised.
Eventually, as you see, Doug, in policy in 2008, children who could make that same claim coming in from Mexico, and believe me, the violence south of us, with heads rolling all over the place and the streets full of blood, there's plenty of argument that can be made for kids that are fleeing that violence and being called to be the foot soldiers for the cartels. There's an argument to be made for those kids as well, and yet they're being deported immediately back into Mexico. The call from a lawmaker, for example, like Henry Cuellar, is to fix the law and deport these kids from Central America immediately, just like we sent the Mexicans back to their country immediately.
Yeah, the Mexican kids, they're provided protection, but the protection levels aren't as high as you referenced those from other countries. And in fact, the law was primarily looking at individuals being used as trafficking victims from China at the time. And it's just ironic now that the law is now being applied to these kids coming in from Central America. I think, interestingly, I went back and looked, and in 2011, there were about 17,700 kids that came in unaccompanied children at the border. And in 2013, it's 41,000. Already it's over 50, and they expect as many as 90,000.
That's 10-4.
90,000 this year.
Yeah, joining us on 710 KURV, he's president of the Immigration Lawyers Association, is Doug Stump.
Doug, Tim Sullivan here. Considering the lawsuit that prompted this 2008 law, can this law be changed? And could it be changed fairly quickly if Congress wanted to take hold of the issue? Changed to allow the fact that Central American kids would be allowed to be sent back quickly?
Well, I think that's the important issue. I mean, clearly Obama has already said now that he recognizes that he's blaming this law for part of the issue. From my own personal perspective, no one's to blame, but if anyone's to blame, everyone is to blame, and we can discuss the dynamics behind that later. Another call if you want to.
Yeah.
But if he pushes this through, many in Congress have already said that they will support a repeal of those particular provisions. But that takes us back to square one, doesn't it? I mean, the Supreme Court has already said you have to provide these children with certain protections. So if Congress...
So we could see another lawsuit coming out of this if they wanted to try to change the law?
Absolutely. I can see another lawsuit. Again, though, Congress ultimately has the authority to, set immigration laws. But I suspect that there would be some immediate litigation following the repeal.
Could this be made a part of a comprehensive immigration reform bill?
Hey, that's you bring up a very good point because we already have a Senate bill passed, right?
Yeah.
And the House refuses to put a bill on the floor, because if they say, if we put a bill on the floor, then we're concerned that some of the provisions in the Senate bill, might be passed in the House, and then if we have a conference, we're going to have a law that they don't want. Well, this is going to be an immigration law, and so if they put this particular piece of legislation on the floor, is that going to give immigration advocates an opportunity to drive through immigration reform, the very reform that some of the Republicans don't want to see?
Yeah.
It could be a neat little political play, couldn't it?
To say the least.
In the immigration reform law that's being called for comprehensively, you would put that law, comprehensive law, on the same chopping block potentially at the high court if there are plenty of suits coming at it at the same time. Doesn't it make more sense to go piecemeal and fix what's wrong one thing at a time?
That's what many of the Republicans advocate. The concern is that I don't know that you're ever going to get a consensus in Congress. That's the problem right now.
If you can get a consensus right now with the mess that we have here in Deep South Texas, why do we even need a central government? Seriously, why do we need Washington for? What a mess.
Isn't it disturbing that adults in Congress, can't reach any kind of consensus on anything? The Senate bill, calls for immediate increased, border enhancement, personnel, equipment,
absolutely,
technology. And then they would.
Yeah, none of that is going to help us because the law needs to be fixed. That loophole needs to be closed right now. And what the White House is calling for is billions of dollars of more funding. A lot of that would be for your profession, you guys, for the attorneys, for the judges to work these cases.
But with all the border
and
security enhancements, you would think the House would go along.
Yeah, I would hope so. But the problem with the House is that they're saying we don't trust Obama enough. That, many in the House would support the Senate bill, but they're afraid that President Obama would not move forward with the enforcement provision if they legalize the undocumented.
Yeah.
If Obama comes forward
there's precedent for that, too.
He might gain a little bit of trust from Republicans. I don't know.
Doug, as always, thank you much. We'll keep in touch. Obviously, this issue is not going to go away anytime soon. Doug Stump is president of the Immigration Lawyers Association.